If the government of a country does not act with seriousness, intention, and urgency to the pleas of its people who are daily massacred and silenced, what then is expected of other world leaders? Should they fold their arms and watch, or should they intervene in the name of humanity? Yet, when the world power steps in, the question remains, would such an intervention truly be for the interests of that country in need, or would it serve another ulterior motive, one that is exploitative, cleverly wrapped in diplomacy? Or could it, perhaps, be one of those rare moments when intervention stands indeed for justice and the defense of life itself? Well, these are not questions for Nigeria alone. Across the continent, from Tanzania, where many hoped for a difference under a woman's leadership, only to face disappointment, to nations still struggling to breathe under the weight of corruption, the dilemma endures. Does the rot truly lie in the seat of power, or in the people who climb their way to it? Would external intervention be the remedy? Would that ever be the remedy? Or should the people, like the citizens of Madagascar, once again rise with such determination that their will alone forces corrupt leadership, not just out of the seat, but out of the nation entirely? Well, all this and more we'll explore in today's briefings. Welcome to the Flash News. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Well, over the weekend, Ambazonia's diplomatic draft session was successful. It was concluded a significant stride in the ongoing liberation movement that continues to intensify as political tensions deepen within French Cameroun. With fears that the post-election unrest in French Cameroun could spill over into Ambazonia and worsen the plight of southern Cameroonians, the Ambazonian government, through General Hardknock, has issued a new decree titled Operation Final Push. Now, according to the decree, the borders between the two Cameroons will be shut down effective Tuesday, November 4th, 2025, until further notice. Now, no movement of vehicles, aircraft, or seacraft will be permitted in or out of Ambazonian territory. The order further bans all import and export activities between the two Cameroons, that is French Cameroun and Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, directing that all such exchanges henceforth occur exclusively between Southern Cameroons and Nigeria. Now, in a strong statement, the Ambazonian government demands the immediate, unconditional and permanent withdrawal of all colonial forces from Ambazonia before Tuesday midnight, warning that any violation of this directive will be treated as acts of aggression. Finally, all Ambazonian securities agencies, the Ambazonian State Army and Liberation Forces have been commanded to execute and enforce this order within their respective jurisdiction beginning midnight Tuesday, November 4th. But of course, the General had not specified that ongoing imports and exports within Nigeria and Southern Cameroon is completely permissible. But then the decree marks a decisive phase in Ambazonia's liberation campaign, one the government describes as both a defensive and sovereign assertion of its right to self-determination, especially at a time when instability grips the neighboring colonial regime. To hear the decree for yourself, let's take a listen to General Hardknock.
Fellow citizens, fellow compatriots, today is Friday, the first day of November 2025, and you're once again in the company of General Hardknock. Coming up, the closure of Ambazonia, La République du Cameroun borders, codenamed Operation Final Push. The Ambazonia National Self-Defense Council, NSC, subordinated to the government of the Federal Republic of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, under the stewardship of His Excellency President Samuel Ikome Sako, after due consultation and in consultation with the generals on the home front, and Considering the escalating post-elections violence and tensions in neighboring La République du Cameroon and the urgent need for preemptive measures against possible spillover effects that would exacerbate the plight of the Ambazonian people already suffocating under the horrifying shadow of an over 8-year-old unabated genocide declared by dictator Paul Biya of La République du Cameroon in 2017, conscious of the unflinching attachment of the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonian people to the universal ideals and values of freedom, liberty, justice, peace, dignity, and sovereignty, conscious of the Council's role and bounden duty to ensure unyielding defense of the Ambazonian people and the territorial integrity of Ambazonia, hereby declares and informs national and international opinion as follows. Article 1. The borders between the Federal Republic of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia and the Republic of Cameroon or La République du Cameroon shall be shut down completely as from Tuesday, November 4th, 2025 till further notice. This operation, codenamed Operation Final Push, implies that there shall be no movement of vehicles, ships, boats, and aircrafts from La République du Cameroon into Ambazonia and vice versa, as all roads, waterways, and airspace shall be shut down. Article 2. Consistent with this decree, all imports and exports between La République du Cameroon and the Federal Republic of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia are henceforth halted, and the Ambazonian people are hereby encouraged to export to and import from Nigeria. And this means that only the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonian borders with Nigeria shall remain open. Article 3. This Self-Defense Council, in keeping with the executive orders of the President of the Federal Republic of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, His Excellency Dr. Samuel Sako Ikomi, orders the immediate, unconditional, and permanent departure of all La République du Cameroon's colonial forces still found within the national territory of Ambazonia before doomsday. That is to say, all La République du Cameroon's, be it gendarmes, army, police, penitentiary administration, DOs, SDOs, governors, and their co-workers should leave the territory of Ambazonia immediately, unconditionally, and permanently before the thickest darkness covers them. Article 4. This decree goes into effect as from the midnight of Monday breaking Tuesday, November 4th, 2025, and shall be rigorously and vigorously executed by all ASA Major Generals, Generals, Colonels, Captains, Commanders, and mobile police officers, each within his or her sphere of specific competence, done at Buea, this first day of November 2025.
Well, in Nigeria, the recent threat of diplomatic and possible military action against Nigeria by the United States President Donald Trump, it has stirred global debate. While some voices, including Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke, have called for calm and renewed dialogue, Trump's warning has touched a nerve one rooted in years of unaddressed atrocities, the slow-burning persecution of Christians across northern and central Nigeria. For over a decade, militant Islamist groups such as Boko Haram and ISWAP have waged brutal campaigns against Christian communities, torching churches, raiding villages, and displacing millions of Christians. From Borno to Benue, Plateau to Kaduna, the earth bears silence witness to mass graves and endless mourning. What began as isolated insurgencies has become a sustained pattern of violence many now call a Christian genocide. Now, despite countless pleas from victims, families, and church leaders, The Nigerian government has often tried to downplay the religious element of the crisis, calling it a herder-farmer conflict. Yet survivors, human rights groups, and international watchdogs have presented overwhelming evidence of targeted killings carried out by Islamist extremists. Now, the cries for justice grew louder, and when government silence persisted, social media became the megaphone of the wounded. Videos, testimonies, and harrowing images broke through national barriers, forcing the world to see what Nigeria preferred to ignore. Now, one man who became the face of this painful truth is Reverend Ezekiel Dachoma of Plateau State. His relentless documentation of attacks, funerals, and testimonies of survivors has made him both a voice of hope and a target of fear.
If my government is denying genocide, what will they say about it? United Nations, European Union, take note. This is the genocide of people that were killed.
Well, in that particular video, you see him pointing to the numbers of Christians that have been killed. The numbers of Christians that have been killed. And in another video, we see him standing among the freshly dug graves of believers, lamenting, "Do you see any Muslims here?" Let's take a look.
We are tired to be outside performing burial every day, and they expect us to silence. Now it's an order. Nigerian government came out openly and denied there is no massacre, there is no genocide of Christians in Nigeria. And look at it today. No government. Is there any Muslim here? No. United Nations, I know you're watching it. American Senate, you are watching what I'm doing, I'm saying here. Special advisor to Trump, now, please tell Trump to save our life in Nigeria. They are killing Christians in Nigeria, massacre Christians. If they say they kill Muslims, Muslims are being killed. By who? By Muslims.
Well, despite threats to his life, he continues to speak, saying that they should stop killing people who are not ready to die. Pastors and leaders must be protected. He acknowledges the complexity of the crisis too, reminding the world that not all Muslims or Fulanese support these violence.
Allow us to rest. I've been speaking since in the morning, and I have a lot to say again. Come and see how this man's head was butchered at the point of death. I could have rushed to this place to perform burial, but I was in Ruku, I was in Kurum, where those women were butchered on the ground. Come and see. Mutilated body. Did by Fulani terrorists. There are good Fulani. They don't love this crisis. There are good Muslims. They are bleeding because of this crisis. They don't want it, and I know. But the terrorists in Islam are busy becoming a tools in the hands of politicians. Now the service chief have been removed. Christopher Musa was removed because you know Christopher Musa has dealt with the insurgents.
Well, there are several videos like this online. We see that in another moment of raw emotion, this Reverend Dachoma says even if he dies for exposing this evil, he prays his blood will speak and bring liberation to Christianity.
Don't know whether I'll be the next. But for me, I've already told my family, my members, if they kidnap me, nobody should contribute one cover. My grace will speak that will lead to Christian liberation. That day is coming. I'm just waiting for them. Even I will tell them, please keep me quickly, because nobody will come. And if they find hope, They will tell them our daddy covenant last week that we should never pay a kobo. Please kill him because my blood will be useful while I'm in the grave. He will fight to finish him. And I know Jesus has approved that for me.
Oh, well, his videos shared widely online brought renewed attention to the killings and intensified pressure on the Nigerian government to act. But as some like that Choma fight for truth, others have worked hard to obscure it. But then before we get into that, there is also a video. If you watch the first video where this Reverend that Choma was talking, he called on President Trump to take immediate action. And it seems President Trump indeed got that message and decided to indeed take actions about it. Let's take a listen to what President Trump said after a tweet.
Just wanted to ask you, do you envisage US boots on the ground?
Could be. I mean, a lot of things I envisage, a lot of things. They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. And they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. I'm not going to allow that to happen.
Well, we see that Omokri, speaking of those who have been called to be acting hypocritically, a prominent commentator, Omokri Rino, who once condemned anti-Christian violence under the Buhari administration, now insists there is no ongoing Christian genocide. Well, his sudden reversal, critics say, is not ideological, it is political. And he says when Fulani militants massacred over 150 villagers in Plateau State earlier this year, Omokri claimed only 17 people had died. The backlash was swift, forcing him to delete the tweet without any apology. Now, this denial drew global scrutiny during a fact-finding mission led by former United States Mayor Mike Arnold, who publicly accused Omokri of deceit and hypocrisy.
How to identify a hypocrite? Their voice is so loud, condemning injustice against Muslims in USA, yet very silent in condemning genocide of Christians in Nigeria. And that person that said that a couple years ago was Rino Omokri, and he's multiple tweets like that. He made this a very big issue about Christian genocide in Nigeria not that long ago. And according to all the observers and all the organizations and watchdogs, they say it has not improved, that the death toll is higher. So I don't know what's dramatically changed, that he was adamantly repeatedly calling it a Christian genocide in Nigeria. The only thing I know that's changed is the administration and his employer. So.
Well, prior to that, Arnold described him as a pathological liar, one who once called the killings genocide, but now denies the very truth he used to shout over. His report painted Omokri as a man who had sold his conscience for political favor, warning that such dishonesty from influential figures help enable the bloodshed to continue unchallenged. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's reaction changed the global tone of the conversation. In a fiery address on November 1st, 2025, he vowed to designate Nigeria a country of particular concern for religious freedom violations, warning that the United States could cut aid or even intervene militarily if the slaughter continued. And that was seen in one of his truth posts. We also see in that video of Donald Trump where he said he would not allow that to continue. And now, prior to that video, Trump's tweet stating that if the Nigerian government continues to allow the killings of Christians, the United States will immediately stop all aid and may go in gun blazing to wipe out the terrorists committing these atrocities. Well, that, to some analysts, was an overreach. Gunboat diplomacy, they call it. But to the thousands of Christians living under constant threat, it was the first sign that someone powerful was finally paying attention. At least someone is speaking for them, is what they felt. The Nigerian presidency responded cautiously, insisting that Nigeria is not a religiously intolerant nation and that its forces are fighting terrorists of all creeds. Yet beneath the diplomatic language lies a haunting question. If the government of a country does not act with seriousness, intention, and urgency to the pleas of a people who are daily massacred, what is expected of other world leaders? Is it truly wrong, then, for another power to intervene when the blood of the innocent cries out, unanswered? Well, some Nigerians fear that Trump's declaration could hide ulterior motives, economic or political. Yet others insist that whatever the motives, the spotlight matters. For too long, global silence has only been complicity. If this intervention, whether rhetorical or real, forces accountability and saves lives, then perhaps it serves a higher good. What Nigeria needs now is not defensiveness or denial, but honesty and decisive reform. The Christian communities in Plateau, Benue, Sokoto, Kaduna, amongst others, other northern nations deserve more than condolences. They deserve protection. The Muslim communities who reject these extremism deserve peace, and the nation itself deserves truth. This moment stands as both a test and a turning point for Nigeria's government, for its conscience, and for its unity. Perhaps after years of ignored pleas and buried bodies, this renewed global scrutiny will finally compel action. And maybe, just maybe, this painful chapter can become the start of something redemptive, a chapter where faith, truth, and justice rise stronger than fear and denial. Well, still on another African country, we see that in the days leading up to last week's election in Tanzania, a familiar but troubling pattern took shape. Opposition leaders rounded up, major parties barred from meaningful competition, and a growing fear spreading through the streets. For many Tanzanians, it was clear long before election day that the country was heading not towards a contest, but towards a coronation. The main opposition party, Chadema, was barred from competing, and its key figures were either arrested or forced into hiding. Tundu Lissu, the party's vice chairman, was detained and later disqualified. Other political actors, including Wazalendo candidates, were also silenced or restricted. Human rights organizations documented arrests of activists, journalists, and civic observers, a climate of repression that made open political engagement nearly impossible. Now, when voting began on October 29, 2025, the sense of inevitability hung heavy in the air. Within hours, protests erupted across Dar es Salaam, Arusha, and Mwanza. Young Tanzanians, frustrated by years of shrinking democratic space, poured into the streets to denounce what they called a stolen election. The government responded with force. Security units were deployed, tear gas filled the air, and gunfire echoed in parts of the country. Opposition figures claim that hundreds of people have been killed, a figure they place at around 700 people, while the United Nations Human Rights Office has confirmed at least 10 verified deaths so far, acknowledging that the true number could be higher due to the nationwide internet shutdown that obscured reporting. The media blackout was near total. Social media platforms, messaging apps, and independent news sites were blocked, cutting Tanzanians off from one another and the world entirely. Now, local journalists said they received warnings not to publish inflammatory stories. Now, despite the tensions, the Electoral Commission quickly declared President Samia Suluhu Hassan the winner with 98% of the vote. 98% of the vote, a figure that rather than inspire confidence, only deepened suspicion among citizens and observers alike. Now, by the weekend, protests had spread even wider, met each time with harsher crackdowns. Rights group described hospitals filling with wounded, families unable to locate loved ones, and the streets of Dodoma and Dar es Salaam under near military control. Now, as one human rights lawyer put it, the mood of the country is that there was no election at all. They cannot vote for one candidate and call that democracy. Yet on Monday, November 3rd, 2025, the inauguration went ahead. State television announced that it would be held at the State House in Dodoma rather than the usual national stadium, and that the public would not attend for security reasons. Even as the ceremony unfolded, the internet remained blocked and security forces patrolled major roads. For millions of citizens, it was not a day of celebration. It was confirmation of what they already knew. For them, the ceremony symbolized not the renewal of democracy, but the ritual completion of its decline. Many spoke of watching the broadcast in silence, describing it as a coronation, not an election. On social media, when access briefly flickered back, Tanzanians abroad and exiled activists mourned what they called the death of their democracy in broad daylight. Well, as President Hassan begins her new terms, questions loom larger than the applause that greeted her swearing in. What does victory mean when most of your rivals were never even allowed to run? How can unity be restored in a nation where protesters are buried instead of heard? And when power consolidates itself through fear rather than fairness, how long before that fear consumes the very foundation it seeks to protect? Tanzania stands now at a fragile crossroad. The government pledges stability and continuity. The opposition calls for justice and new elections. But to ordinary citizens, bruised, grieving, and silenced, today's ceremony felt like an ending, not a beginning. The images from Dodoma may show triumph, but the air across Tanzania carries a different truth. Beneath the anthem and the oath lies a deeper truth, a people still waiting for their democracy to return. Well, away from Africa, we see that at least 20 people have been confirmed dead and more than 300 injured after a powerful magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck northern Afghanistan early on Monday morning, according to the Taliban authorities. Now, the tremor occurred near Mazar-e-Sharif, the capital of Balkh province, at approximately 12:59 a.m. local time, shaking communities across the region. The United States Geological Survey, USGS, reported that the quake's depth and proximity to populated areas make it a potentially devastating event, warning that significant casualties are likely and the disaster is potentially widespread. Officials from the Taliban's health ministry said that the toll is expected to rise as rescue teams continue to reach affected communities. Spokesperson Sharafat Zaman confirmed that at least 320 people have been treated for injuries while emergency responders remain on high alert. Balkh province spokesperson Haji Zaid reported that the quake caused extensive damage to homes and infrastructure, including parts of the historic Blue Mosque, one of the country's most revered religious sites located in the heart of Mazar-e-Sharif. Now, the United Nations mission in Afghanistan, UNAMA, announced that humanitarian teams are already on the ground assessing needs and providing assistance. In a statement on X, formerly Twitter, the UN expressed solidarity with the victims, saying, "We stand with the affected communities and will provide the necessary support." The USGS placed the event under its orange alert category, indicating a need for regional or national level emergency response, as similar events at that level have historically resulted in widespread damage and displacement. Afghanistan, which lies on multiple active fault lines, has suffered several catastrophic earthquakes in recent years. The country's fragile infrastructure and limited emergency resources often worsen the humanitarian toll of such disaster. Over to Japan, we see that Japan's newly appointed Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has announced her intention to hold a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, a move that will mark the first such meeting in more than 2 decades. Now, speaking shortly after assuming office, Takaichi said her government aims to pursue direct dialogue with Pyongyang to address long-standing issues, including North Korea's nuclear ambitions and the abduction of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 1980s, a major point of contention between the two nations. The last meeting between a Japanese leader and a North Korean head of state took place in 2002 when former Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi visited Pyongyang and secured the release of several abductees. Analysts say Takaichi's proposal reflects both a strategic recalibration of Japan's regional diplomacy and a desire to assert stronger leadership in East Asia amid growing tensions involving China, South Korea, and the United States. While Pyongyang has yet to respond to Tokyo's overture, Takaichi emphasized that Japan remains committed to peace and stability on the Korean peninsula through dialogue, not confrontation. And our very last report on the Flash News, we see that at least 9 people are in hospital with life-threatening injuries after a mass stabbing attack aboard a high-speed train traveling from Doncaster to London King's Cross on Sunday. Britain authorities confirmed this. The incident, which police have described as a major incident, occurred near Cambridgeshire, prompting an immediate emergency response and the temporary suspension of train services along the route. A 32-year-old British man has been arrested and charged with 10 counts of attempted murder, following what witnesses described as scenes of chaos and terror inside the train carriages. According to investigators, a rail staff member who courageously intervened to protect passengers suffered life-threatening injuries while trying to disarm the attacker. Police have praised the staff's action as heroic, saying their bravery likely prevented greater loss of life. Emergency services treated several victims at the scene before airlifting the most seriously wounded to nearby hospitals. Authorities have ruled out any links to terrorism but continue to investigate the suspect's motives. We see that the attack has actually sparked renewed calls for enhanced security measures on Britain's rail networks as officials and passengers alike express shock at the rare but devastating act of violence. From Japan's historic diplomatic outreach to North Korea to the heart-wrenching train attack in the United Kingdom that has left several wounded and a nation shaking, to the ongoing cries from Nigeria's Christian communities in the North amid growing global concern, today's headlines remind the world that leadership in every form carries an unshakable duty, the preservation of human life and dignity. Well, as nations navigate tensions, transition, and tragedy, one truth stands clear. Humanity's progress is not measured by power or position, but by the compassion and courage with which leaders and citizens alike confront the pain and promise of their times. Well, this has been the Flash News. Thank you for joining in.